What's up, y'all? I'm Javar, and this is DUSAFARMS. Welcome back to my returning viewers. And for those that are new here, I appreciate you for tuning in. And go ahead and subscribe and like the video, do all this stuff, turn on post notification bells, because you're an amazing person. So just do those things. And if anyone out there would like to further support the channel, a little bit does go a long way. You can head on over to the Patreon. A link will be below in the description. As well as if you like to join the community of other growers and meet and mingle and do all that sorts of things, teach somebody, learn something new from somebody, you can head on over to the Discord. That will also be linked down below in the description. So what is revegging? Now, I know there's going to be some new growers out there that may not be familiar with the term, and all it is your plants are in bloom, you're in flower, you're headed towards that finish line, and your plants decide to stop and do a U-turn and head back towards the start. They're now starting to re-veg and stop flower. They're no longer going to produce flower. They're going to revert over, and you're going to go back to that first little period of growth. Now, what does revegging look like? It looks pretty goofy overall. The main indicator that your plants are revegging is you're going to see some weird growth going on. You're going to see some new sets of leaves most likely coming out of the buds. You're going to start to see them unravel, and they're going to continue to develop until they start producing stems. And then from there, those stems become new growth sites, and from there you got a bunch of them covering your buds, and now you're full on back in veg, and it's just looking goofy at first until it normalizes. So how does revegging happen? The main reason is most likely going to be the fact that you have some sort of light leakage during the periods of lights off, because we know in veg and flower, in order to separate the two and get to flower, we need to transition those lights and turn them to something like a 12-12 schedule. Unless we're going out of flowers, then we could just keep it on 24/7 if we like. And how much light needed to re-veg your plants is going to be strain specific, because there are going to be some that are more susceptible than others. Nutrients can also be a cause of your plants re-vegging, because when we're in flower past the stretch phase, which by stretch phase I mean that first couple weeks, around 21 days, your plants are like going crazy. They're starting to 2x, 3x, 4x in size, and they're using a lot of nitrogen during that phase because they're really growing. But past that phase, they don't need a whole lot of nitrogen. And if there's too much nitrogen present after that phase, it can trick your plants into thinking it needs to continue to grow, which will then result in the plant starting to re-veg. Same thing as the light, your nutrients, and it's going to be strain dependent. It's not a one size fits all. There is a one size fits all for like the general aspect, but there are going to be some differences depending on the strain. All right, so how do you prevent revegging? And also, if you're currently going through it, how can you push through and keep flowering? The best practice in order to prevent revegging is obviously going to be your lights. You want to make sure your light schedule is on point. When the lights are off, they should be off. There should be no lights on. And I know things are going to vary because we do have other equipment. We don't just have our lights. We have other things that produce lights, because everything's smart now. We got smart this, smart that, and usually those type of devices, they have some sort of LED on it to let you know that, hey, it's powered on. And not all of them are the same. There are some that after a while that LED display will automatically turn off and go into a sleep mode, but there's a bunch of others that the lights never cut off. And it may not be the most light. There are some that have an extreme excessive amount of light, and there are some that have minimal light. But try to, get the devices that do not have too much light. You don't want a full-on TV screen for some sort of fan monitor. Like, you might want to remove that and put that on the outside of the tent. So try not to get anything that's, too bright, and try to, go for more of the grow equipment, because a lot of the grow equipment is already going to have this type of stuff in mind. But with the grow equipment, we can't always get it, because we do know it is, it does tend to have the green tax. It does tend to be marked up a little bit more than, the standard, this fan versus that fan, So look out for things like that. And like I said, it's all going to be strain dependent on how much light is needed, because I have a bunch of different things going on. I have these videos I produce during lights off, and I got lights blasting on me, but they're not on the plants themselves. And a good rule of thumb is, if you can read a book, somebody actually gave me this, but if you can read a book in the grow room, there's too much light. So get in your tent, get in your grow room, wherever, turn all the lights off, and then try to read a book. If you can read a page out of that book, or you could just read a sentence, then there's most likely too much light. The way I have my setup right now is all the light is directed towards me, so if I were to walk over there, I wouldn't be able to read a book. And if you do choose to have those monitors in them with bright lights, and you don't want to run into that issue, because you just because you have a light doesn't mean, if it's still dark in there, you may not, run into the issue, unless it's like directly on the bud. Then that bud itself might re-veg, or it could cause the whole plants, but some of the other surrounding plants may not re-veg. But we don't want any of them to re-veg, so if you wanted to be on the safe side, you could do something like taping and covering those LED lights. But needless to say, there is some sort of light being exposed at some point during the periods of lights off in the wild, and the plants still push through and they flower. So just because you have a little bit of light in your grow room does not mean it's the end of the day. Don't see this and be like, hey, he said this, so I got to make sure I tape up everything. I don't want to run into it. You could do that to be sure, but at the same time, you don't have to go rush and do that, because I got a bunch of different lights blaring. Like I said, I'm in here during lights off right now with these lights on filming this, and I've been here for hours, and my plants don't re-veg. But I do run my lights at night, so with it being at night, during the day when they're supposed to be dark, there is light outside, so I have to refrain from, keeping those windows open. I make sure I keep them covered, because I did run into an issue where I had a crack in my window because I have blackout curtains, and that was actually enough light to make my plants re-veg. So for those that do the same thing, I know a lot of us run our lights at night to, avoid on the cost. It cuts down on that bill. Make sure during the day, go out there during that day when it's the brightest of the day, and make sure that you're able to keep it dark. What I do is I just use blackout curtains, and then I'm pretty much good from there. Everything's pretty dark. I can't really, the only time I see light is when I come in here and turn shit on. Other than that, it's fairly dark in this room. Here are a few things that I did when going through a re-veg. One, I always check my lights. I make sure, for one, the light schedule is at what it's supposed to be at, as well as my intensity. So I'm checking the PPFD of my plants. I'm saying like, hey, is it too high? Maybe my intensity is causing them to re-veg, or I just want to make sure that it's ideal, that they're getting enough of what they need, but not too much to where it's stressing them. Since I am not running CO2, I'm not cranking it up too high. I know they say pretty much around at past 850 without running CO2, it's pretty much a waste at that time. So I'm usually around that 800, 850, between 8 and 9 range. That's what I'm capping out of during flower. And if it's too much higher than that, I will lower it back down. But with the schedule, if I'm rocking a 12-12, I do change it. I change it to 11 and 13. 13 hours being the hours that the plants are in darkness, and that does help out a bit. I actually have been playing with running that throughout the entire flower stage in general, and also cutting back that hour in veg. I know a lot of people run 18-6. I've been doing a lot of 17 and 7s during veg, and then come flower, I've been doing 11 and 13. It does have the only things that's different about it is your daily light interval is going to go down, so you can bump up that light intensity. So I will go closer to 900 to get my DLI back up, since I am missing out on that 1 hour. And with it being off an extra hour, pretty much every 24 days, you're missing out on a whole day. So that's going to be 1 day shorter in that growth span. So total for the entire grow, you may be saving yourself about 2, 3, 4 days if you're lucky. So you're not cutting back a whole lot, but every day counts, especially that last weekend when you want the plants to be done. Or if you just got something that likes to flower a little bit longer and you just want to push it a couple days. If you got a 70-day plant and you want to push it to more like a 68, 67, they have means by doing that, 11 and 13. But definitely, if you're going through a re-veg right now, I would give your plants a little bit more darkness. I know I've seen a lot of people say, when I was trying to figure out what to do about it, I've seen a lot of people saying like 48 hours of darkness and then just go back to the 12-12. Well, I didn't want to do that. My plants, I don't want to miss it on any growth. I want to make it a subtle change, because then I feel like if I just knock them in darkness, they were already, stressed out and re-vegging. Now I'm, turning the lights off, and they don't know what's going on. I don't want to be tricky and play with my plants too much. I want them to realize like, hey, it's flower. Let's flower. And I just don't want to do too much to my plants because they're already kind of stressed out. So I didn't want to do that. And let me know if anybody has tried that and if it has worked. It seemed like it could work, but at the same time, it seems like it's doing too much and it's going a little too overboard. I feel like something like the 48 hours of darkness would definitely be beneficial if you were like really in depth in the re-veg. Like if you were gone for a week and your plants throughout that whole week, they were re-vegging and you were starting to get some nice new growth on those bud sites, then something like a 48 hours of darkness may help. But if you're just starting that re-veg process, you see those leaves coming out, I think the 11 and 13 will be just fine. So depending on how severe that re-veg is depending on how severe your actions and the actions you're going to have to take on it are. Also with the nutrients, I cut back on them. So I give a lower dose of nutrients, but I'm not going too crazy on it. Really, I don't really care too much about the nutrients. I am checking for like the nitrogen and seeing how much is present and what I got going on. Maybe I grabbed the wrong bottle. Maybe I grabbed a Grow A instead of a Bloom A. Also with my watering, I increased the drawback. So with me being at a 60% water capacity in my cocoa, and I usually strive for around 40-45% in flower, I'll typically, if going through a re-veg, I'll bring it down to like 30%. So that's now a 50% drawback. So now my plants are knowing like, hey, this isn't abundant. We need to finish. We're not going to have this forever. We don't have time to re-veg and restart our life over. we're running out right here, so we need to keep on until we can finish, because that's all your plants want to do. They want to finish, so they don't really want to re-veg. It just happened. They were forced to re-veg, so now unless it's like bad genetics or something like that and they're just prone to re-vegging it, then it's just like, okay, they were going to do it regardless. But if you got some nice genetics and everything's crisp about them, they don't typically want to re-veg or do anything funny. They just want to, get to the end. They may not want to get smoked, but that's what's going to happen. So, by you increasing your drawbacks, maybe lowering your nutrients and checking that nitrogen, you're going to kind of let your plants know that, hey, these aren't the ideal conditions to be going back and re-vegging. Okay, lastly, you may want your plants to re-veg, and this is why. Because me personally, I'm actually about to re-veg some plants right now because the clones I took in veg, they didn't make it. They died off, and, well, I found something I wanted, and I want to keep it, and the only way to keep it is if I re-veg those plants out. So all I'm going to be doing is I'm still going to be harvesting them, but I will leave enough growth behind. I'm going to leave some of that lower larvae, bud, and leaves that I don't really care for at all. And then from there, I'm going to start like re-vegging them from that. So I'll be able to take some clones once it normalizes out, and then now I'll have some moms. And it's the same things that we talked about preventing it. Just flip the light schedule back to what it was and start changing up the nutrients, start giving them that nitrogen that we've been neglecting them from. And then from there, it may take a while. It's also going to be strain dependent. A lot of things are strain dependent, but whenever your plants are ready to revert and change back over, some may do it a lot sooner than others, but they'll eventually do it. And I'm not going to say all the time. It is a very stressful feeling because you don't know. Like, you're on your last limb. It's like, please make it, please make it. There are some that are going to do a lot better than others and some that just won't do at all. So like I said, if there's anything you can take from this, is strain dependent. One thing, it's not a one size fits all. So be cautious, be careful, be calm, collected, stay high. Happy growing, everybody. Appreciate you all for tuning in. Until next time, peace.